What's up, NFL fans? Thank you for tuning in to the inaugural episode of Joel Empey Talks NFL. I am your host, of course, Joel Empey, and this episode we're going to preview a lot of the things that are going on in week one of the NFL. Now, I am just beyond excited for the football season to start. This happens to me around the time of the NFL draft. The anticipation just really starts to build to this moment in September when the NFL season is going to begin. And now we're just a couple of days out from Bears versus Packers, week one, Thursday night football. And I am just brimming with excitement. Now, you might be wondering why I'm so excited and optimistic with all this Dolphins apparel around. You know, the Dolphins not the greatest outlook this season. But, you know, I'm a long-term Dolphins fan. I'm a lifelong fan. And, you know, you have to build for the future. You know, you can't win it every year. And I'm hoping that we lose every game this season and get the number one draft pick and tank for Tua. You know, the Miami Dolphins, we're doing a really good job right now of actually building for the future. We're not playing that, in the middle, monkey in the middle type of thing where you get 6 to 10 wins a season like we've been doing. And you can never get a top draft pick, and you're not really, you're kind of trying to win now, but you don't really have the team to do it. You know, we're tanking. We're doing what the Raiders did last year. We're going to try to build a team here. We have 10 rookies on the team. All 6 of the players we drafted signed to the team. We have 4 undrafted free agents. You know, we got rid of Kiko. We got rid of Kenny Stills. Sucks that we got rid of Tunsil, but the draft capital we got for him is phenomenal. So, you know, I'm excited for this NFL season. And I'm even more excited that the Dolphins are tanky because there's so many interesting teams to watch this year, and I just get to enjoy football. Like, there's no pressure. I'm not expecting the Dolphins to win any games, so there's no pressure on watching those games. There's none of, how many times on a Sunday I watched a Dolphins game and we lost, and it just ruined the rest of the day for me. You know, I could barely even enjoy the rest of the games. No more of that this year. I'm expecting a 1-15 season. We'll beat the Patriots one time because we always do. And that's what I'm expecting for this season. But let's move on from the Dolphins. Unless you're a Dolphins fan, you don't care about the Dolphins. They're not a relevant team this year. So let's talk first about the games that I am most interested in watching this week. As I said, with the Dolphins being a team that's not really worth watching, I'm just going to enjoy all the other teams. I'm going to love watching Cleveland play. I'm going to love watching Baltimore play, who the Dolphins are playing in week one. I'm going to enjoy watching Atlanta, the Vikings, who are playing in week one against each other. You know, there's so many teams, the Bears, so many teams that are exciting to watch, and I'm just going to watch them all and just drink it in and not have any worries about who wins or loses the games. I'm just going to get to watch the games as a fan and enjoy the damn things. So games to watch in week one, Bears versus Packers, first game of the season. That is a game to watch. I mean, Bears versus Packers, the most historic rivalry in the NFL. The Bears, I think, you know, they're a real Super Bowl contender this year. And the Packers are always a Super Bowl contender as long as Aaron Rodgers is in town. Now, I don't like the Packers as much this year. As I like the Bears. I think the Bears are just preposterously stacked. But, man, the Packers and Bears, that's always a great matchup. Last year, week one, when they played, that was a phenomenal matchup. You know, Aaron Rodgers down by 1,000,000 points, gets knocked out of the game, somehow comes back and wins it. You know, so those are the kinds of games you expect out of the Bears and Packers. And what a way to open the NFL season. Now, another game, the Falcons and the Vikings. This is another game of 2 legitimate Super Bowl contenders this year. You know, Atlanta, their defense is healthy now, and they've got all the playmakers on offense. Like, it's a wild offense. Losing Tevin Coleman hurts a little bit, but man, Matt Ryan was an MVP just a couple of years ago. They still have Julio Jones. Calvin Ridley's coming into his own as a second-year wide receiver. I'm expecting big things out of Atlanta this year, but I'm expecting equally big things out of the Vikings this year. You know, the Vikings, man, they got obviously just an absolutely stacked offense with playmakers, and that's not even the strength of their team. The strength of the team is the defense over there. They have one of the best defenses in the NFL. So this week one matchup, don't sleep on Atlanta's D. Atlanta's D is going to be much improved this year, and Atlanta and Minnesota, that is going to be a knockdown, drag-out war in week one of the NFL, and you know, It's crazy to talk about playoff implications right away, but the NFC is so competitive. It's just ridiculous. And both these teams are real competitors in the NFC. So, taking an L here, that could be serious towards the end of the season. I don't want to overstate a week 1 game, but man, that is going to be a banger of a game. It's my personal game of the week for sure. Now, another really exciting game in the AFC is Kansas City versus Jacksonville. I mean, obviously Jacksonville had a bit of a dip down last year, but that defense is still intact. It's still an elite defense. Kansas City, most dynamic offense in the NFL last year. We're expecting similar results this year. Probably not quite to the same level as last year. You can't expect Pat Mahomes to have that kind of a year again. Defenses are going to figure him out. He takes a lot of risks, and it paid off for him. It seemed like almost every time last year. You have to expect some of those balls to bounce in the other direction this year. So I definitely favor the Chiefs in that one, but the Jaguars, maybe Nick Foles can give them a little bit extra life. If Nick Foles can sling the ball at all, it'll open up the game for Leonard Fournette. Everybody wants to talk about how Leonard Fournette's yards per carry are so low, but yards per carry are kind of a stupid stat if you think about it. There's so many factors that go into yards per carry, like the fact that Blake Bortles was their quarterback and nobody was threatened by the throwing game at all. Everybody knew that the only threat on the Jaguars offense was Leonard Fournette. So they're stacking boxes. They're playing run D. Leonard's is hurt for the majority of the season and not really motivated to come back to a terrible team. So I'm excited to see how Fournette bounces back this year. I think it's a bounce back year for Fournette. I unfortunately didn't get any shares of him in fantasy football, but I digress about that. We'll get to fantasy football later. Excuse me. Now, the last game that I have as one of my games to watch this week, a must-watch. It's another primetime game. The Chiefs, Jaguars, and Falcons, Vikings are 1 o'clock games, so you're going to have to pick between those two. Maybe if you got 2 monitors like I do, you can watch them both. But the first game, Bears-Packers, obviously a primetime game. And this other game that I want to really watch this week, Houston and New Orleans, another primetime game in New Orleans. New Orleans in primetime at home. Very, very difficult to beat, but man, Houston's got a good team this year. I think Houston and the Chiefs are probably the teams to beat in the AFC this year. Obviously, you guys might think it's the Patriots. I'm biased against the Patriots. I hate them. I never really think they're that good, but they're like the Packers. As long as they got number 12 back there, they can just find ways to win. The Packers are the NFC Patriots like that. It doesn't matter what kind of team they have around. As long as number 12 is in the game, it doesn't matter what the score is. They got a shot at coming back and winning. Just like, the Packers did in week 1 last year against the Bears. And, Patriots against the Falcons, Patriots against everybody. And so those are my games to watch this week. Those are the 4 games that you got to tune into this week. Everybody's going to be tuning into the Bears, Packers, and Houston, New Orleans because those are primetime games. But if you're looking for games at 1 o'clock on Sunday to watch, you got to tune into the Falcons and Vikings. And then the second game that I would tune into is the Chiefs and the Jaguars. So now let's look into week 1. I've already given a couple of my predictions, but I'm just going to give my game predictions. I'm going to keep score here of all of my picks throughout the season, so you're going to get to see how many I get right, how many I get wrong, what my percentage is, and then, as the season goes on, maybe you can decide if I'm credible or not. So, game 1, Packers versus Bears. I just think the Bears are a better football team all around. Obviously, much better defensive team than the Packers. The Packers have improved on defense, but, the Bears are the number 1 defense team in the NFL, with up there with the Jaguars, and I would say those are probably the top 2 Ds in the NFL. So, best defense in the NFL, and then let's look at the offense. Mitch Trubisky coming into his 3rd year in the NFL, 2nd season under Matt Nagy. He's going to be a lot more comfortable in the system. I think this is a big year for Trubisky, and it's just because he's got so many playmakers around him. Now, I don't know who to trust besides David Montgomery in terms of fantasy football from the Bears, besides David Montgomery and Mitch Trubisky. And the reason why I like Mitch is because he's got rushing upside, and also because of all the playmakers around him. Like, who knows if Tariq Cohen's going to be good on a week-to-week basis, or Allen Robinson, or Anthony Miller, or Trey Burton. But what we do know is that if those guys, all those talented guys need to get fed the ball, and who's going to be feeding them the football? Mitch Trubisky. So I like Trubisky this year. I think he's got just such a talented cast around him. Matt Nagy, such a talented offensive coach. And then, I was saying, that's not even the strength of the team. The strength of the team is by far, far and away the defense. That is, one of the most devastating squads in the entire NFL. Talking about offense or defense, the Chicago Bears defense is one of the premier squads in the NFL. And, I like the Bears here against the Packers. Now, Chiefs, Jaguars. Also, the Bears at home in primetime, that definitely gives them a little bit extra of a nod. Now, Chiefs, Jaguars. Let's get into it. So, obviously, it's a great O against a great D. And ultimately, you got to go with the Chiefs. I think that they're an AFC favorite, along with Houston. I think those are the two AFC favorites right now when you look at it. And, I just have to suspect that the Chiefs are going to be able to score more points than the Jaguars. As simply as that. I mean, that's how you win NFL games. The NFL in week 1 is pretty hard to predict because you don't really know the identities of these teams. But ultimately, I'm going to assume that the identity of the Chiefs remains the same. They're going to be high octane, and they're going to be able to get it done here against the Jaguars. Now, another game. Next game I have here is Falcons and Vikings. Now, as I was saying, this is my game of the week. And once again, I'm going to favor the home team here. That's the Vikings. I'm going to favor the home team. The Vikings, these are both two extremely well-rounded squads. This is such an even matchup, and it's kind of a coin flip to me. I would pick whoever's the home team. So it's as simple as that. I'm taking the home team in this one, Vikings. Now, Browns versus Titans. This is, the Browns are my number one team to watch this year. They're just going to be so exciting. Baker Mayfield, just an electric guy. Then they added OBJ, Jarvis Landry, as a Dolphins fan, my favorite wide receiver in the NFL. And, I think he's the best underneath wide receiver in the NFL. And he's going to just thrive in being the wide receiver 2 on the team. He doesn't have to play out wide. He can play in the slot. He can do the underneath routes that he's much better at. And I actually love him as a PPR fantasy football play. A lot of people are really low on Jarvis Landry this year. I think in PPR, he's going to dominate. I think he's getting 100 receptions. He's going to be open all the time. He knows how to get open underneath anyways. But with teams having to key on Odell, it's going to be just insane, I think, the number of catches that Jarvis is going to be able to rack up underneath. And plus, you got Nick Chubb in there at running back. I think he's going to be a top 5 finishing running back this year because, once again, the Odell factor. He just benefits from Odell drawing double coverage and loosening the defensive fronts, and he's going to be able to just run wild this year. I know that the Browns' O-line isn't that great, but Baker can scramble. They got so many playmakers. I love the Browns this year. I can't wait to watch them play. The Titans, I do not care for at all this year. They should be an okay squad. They're always better than you think they're going to be, but I just can't trust that offense. Their defense is good, but in a game when they're playing a high octane offense, I just don't think they're going to be able to keep up. If they're playing any kind of middling offense, I think that they're going to be able to ground and pound with Derrick Henry and keep up, but I don't think that's going to be the case against the Browns. I got them losing this one handily. Bills and Jets. Now, here's another one. Who knows about this game? This is another one, week 1 in the NFL. You don't really know these teams' identities. I don't really feel comfortable betting on either of them. So I would go with the home team, the Jets. And to be honest, I think that one of these two teams could actually end up being good this year. I'm not sure which one or even if one of them will be, but I wouldn't be all that surprised if one of them was good this year. They have some good pieces on defense, both the Bills and the Jets. If Josh Allen or Sam Darnold can take a step forward this year, if Le'Veon Bell can be Le'Veon Bell for the Jets, they got Jamison Crowder there. They got some playmakers over there in New York. Their defense can keep them in the game, which they can. New York could be good, and same thing with Buffalo. If Josh Allen could take a step forward, and he can run the ball the way that he was towards the end of last year, and he can throw the ball a little bit better. Plus, with that defense and an easier division playing against us, I think that one of these two teams could come out as a playoff contender, as a wild card team. But I wouldn't hold my breath on it. I'm going to take the Jets here because they're home, but I really don't feel super confident either way in this one. Ravens and Dolphins. I got the Ravens all day. I think the Dolphins are going to win one game this year against the Patriots, and we're going to be 1-15. The Ravens are going to run the ball more than anybody. We're not going to be able to stop it. Their defense is elite. We probably got the worst offensive line in the NFL. I do not like our chances. I expect a blowout in this one. I don't care what the spread is. I'd probably take the Ravens with the spread. Redskins and Eagles. Here's an interesting game. The Eagles, they're a team that could be a playoff contender. They just won the Super Bowl a couple of years ago, and their team is not really much worse if you look at it on paper than that team that won the Super Bowl. So why aren't the Eagles getting talked about? I feel like they're not getting talked about that much. And I don't know if I necessarily even think that they're like a shoo-in in the playoffs because the NFC is so competitive. But they're a good football team. They got home field advantage. It is a divisional game, but, Case Keenum and the Redskins, I just don't think that they have enough pieces yet. I think they're still building towards being a good team. Them and the Giants are definitely well behind the Eagles and the Cowboys in that division. So I got the Eagles all day in that one. That'd be one I wouldn't mind betting on, although it is divisional, and those are always scary. Like I remember last year, week 1, Tampa Bay beat New Orleans, and that just screwed me in my suicide pool. And it was like, you never want to pick divisional games week 1. So maybe stay away from that one, but I do love the Eagles. Now, Rams and Panthers, I have a controversial opinion on the Rams this year. I think they're going to have a Super Bowl hangover. Jared Goff didn't look good after Cooper Kupp went down, and Todd Gurley was a little bit banged up, so their running game wasn't the same. But I think without those safety blankets of a good running game and a really good underneath wide receiver, I don't know how good Jared Goff can be, throwing to the outside and not being able to lean on, one of the most efficient running backs in the game. So we don't know how Todd Gurley's going to return this year. There's a lot of speculation about what his health is going to be and what his timeshare at the running back position is going to be. And you hear that they're going to be running a lot more 2 wide receiver sets because the Rams ran more 3 wide receiver sets than anybody in football last year. They're going to be running more 2 wide receiver sets with Cooks and Woods and keeping Kupp off the field. And I think Kupp is their best receiver. Goff has the best rapport with him. Goff is more comfortable throwing the ball underneath, it seems like. And we also don't know, I guess, how Cooper Kupp is going to return, from the ACL injury. I got Cooper Kupp in some PPR leagues. It's I think he's got a high ceiling in PPR still, but I think the Rams are going to regress, have a little Super Bowl hangover. The Patriots just dominated them in the Super Bowl so badly. That was the worst football game I've ever seen in my life. And, I think other teams are going to be able to take plays from the Patriots there and going to be able to stop this Sean McVay offense that's been so unstoppable for the last 2 years until that Super Bowl game. I really think that the Rams are going to dip down this year. And the Panthers are a dark horse team. They got playmakers on offense. If Cam Newton stays healthy for 16 games, he's just a monster out there. He's so good at everything. He's so good at football, man. He is so good at football. Christian McCaffrey out there, and then Kuechly and the whole defense is still over there. I got the Panthers winning this one. Home field to me is a 3 or 4 point advantage right there, 3 or 4 point swing right there. And even if the Panthers were on the road, I think I would like them to upset here. But also, the Rams are traveling across the country, West Coast to East Coast. That's never easy. So that I got the Panthers in that one. That might be one worth putting a little bit of money on because I haven't looked at the odds or anything because I'm not that into gambling anymore. But I would imagine the Panthers are probably dogs, and they got home field advantage. I like the Panthers a lot in this one. I'm feeling weirdly confident about the Panthers. Colts and Chargers. Obviously, the loss of Andrew Luck is huge for the Colts. I think Jacoby Brissett is a very capable quarterback, And the defense is developing there for the Colts. Their O-line is really good. Marlon Mack's a pretty good running back. They got some guys at wide receiver. They got 2 good tight ends. The Colts could have a good season still. And, in a weaker AFC than compared to the NFC, they could maybe squeak into the playoffs. I don't know. I think that they are being a little bit underrated since Luck left. Having said all that, I think the Chargers are one of the premier teams in the AFC, even without Melvin Gordon. Their defense is just stacked, and Phillip Rivers is, one of the greats, and they got playmakers on offense like Keenan Allen, Mike Williams, Hunter Henry. They just got playmakers galore, and I think the Chargers are one of the best teams in the NFL this year, so, that's why I haven't beaten the Colts, but I do think the Colts are getting written off a little bit prematurely here, so that's an interesting thing to look at going forward. Now, Bengals and Seahawks. This is probably my blowout of the week. I got the Seahawks dominating. They're at home with the 12th man. Seahawks are always dominant at home, And the Bengals are one of the bottom teams in the NFL, like a bottom 4 team with, us, the Cardinals, the Giants, bottom 4 type of team in the NFL. So, and, I got the Seahawks as one of the premier teams in the NFL. So, that's enough said. I got Seahawks all day in that one. I would probably take the Seahawks with the spread. I don't care what the spread is. Giants and Cowboys. I mean, as I just said, I think the Giants are one of the worst teams in the NFL. That's not obviously not a controversial opinion at all. I think everybody agrees with that. Cowboys, a premier team in the NFL. Even without Ezekiel Elliott, they still have an elite defense. And, Amari Cooper, Michael Gallup, Jason Witten returning. It'll be interesting to see how he plays into the offense. It'll be interesting to see if they don't sign Zeke before week 1 and how Tony Pollard does. I got some shares of Pollard in fantasy football. If he's available on your waiver wire, go get Tony Pollard, just in case Zeke doesn't play. Although it's looking like they're going to figure out a contract sooner or later. Anyways, I got the Cowboys all day in that one. 49ers, Buccaneers. This is a game of 2 teams with actual decent offensive potential. I would say in the case of Tampa Bay, really good offensive production potential. With Bruce Arians there, and they have so many playmakers on offense. Interesting thing, a lot of people are low on Jameis Winston this year. From a fantasy football perspective, I love Winston this year. I absolutely adore him. He's got Chris Godwin, Mike Evans, O.J. Howard. Chris Godwin and Mike Evans are literally both ranked in the top 20 by basically all experts in the fantasy football world. And O.J. Howard's a top 5 tight end, according to basically all experts. Top 4 tight end, according to all experts in fantasy football. Now, if you have 2 top 20 wide receivers and 1 top 5 tight end, these guys are all pass catchers. How are those guys going to finish in any of those positions if the quarterback isn't scoring a ton of fantasy points? So I love Jameis Winston this year. I think he was probably one of the best values in fantasy football. But talking about real football, the 49ers with Jimmy G, they got some playmakers over there. Marquise Goodwin. It'll be interesting to see how Tevin Coleman gets into this offense. He's obviously familiar with it being Kyle Shanahan over there, his former coach from Atlanta. Ultimately, these are 2 teams with, Tampa's got a high-octane offense, I believe. They could use some work at running back, but they got a high-octane offense, high passing octane. And the Niners, it's going to be interesting to see how Jimmy G does this year, obviously coming off of the injury from last year. He's got playmakers around him. George Kittle, one of the premier tight ends. I think he's going to be the number 1 receiver on that team in terms of receptions and probably even yardage and touchdowns by the end of the year. Marquise Goodwin, deep threat. Dante Pettis, up-and-comer. I love Pettis. I'm a big Pettis guy. And so the Niners and the Bucs, neither of them have defense. That's the big thing, is neither of them have defense. The Niners offense is a little bit questionable. It'll be interesting to see how they play. Bucs offense, I think, is going to be good. So I'm just taking Tampa here. Not to mention, Tampa's at home. I keep harping on the home thing, but it's a home game. And they're on the East Coast, Tampa Bay, Florida, obviously. San Francisco, California. That's a big flight across the country. You got to favor the East Coast team a little bit extra whenever a West Coast team has to come all the way across the country. It is a 4 o'clock game, so that helps San Fran a little bit, but still, that's a long flight. Lions and Cardinals. So I got Bucks in that one for sure. Lions and Cardinals. Now here's a game that nobody gives a shit about. Unless you're a Lions fan or a Cardinals fan specifically. I mean, this is a game that I just am not going to watch. I'm going to watch every single other game before I watch this one, including the Patriots and the Steelers, which I do not care about at all. I think the Cardinals this year are going to be garbage. This is another hot take by me, kind of like the Rams having a hangover from the Super Bowl this year. I think that a big storyline this year is that the Cardinals are going to be just terrible. Like, I don't understand why anybody thinks the Cardinals are going to be good. Cliff Kingsbury was, a marginal coach from a winning perspective in college. Like, why do you think that he's going to be able to come into the NFL and win games when he could hardly win games in college? And then everybody is so enamored with, Cliff Kingsbury's high-paced offense. They're going to run 75 plays a game. Yeah, how did that work for Chip Kelly? If you guys remember when Chip Kelly went to the Eagles, he was saying the same thing. We're going to run a ton of plays. We're gonna bang, bang, bang. We're going to have 15 seconds between plays, And I remember even on the broadcast, they would show a little timer, counting up, to show how fast they were running each play. But running plays extremely fast is not good if you don't have a good defense, for one, and for two, you're going 3 and out. Why did people think that Kyler Murray's going to walk in here and be really good? I don't see it. They don't have playmakers on the offense. The O-line's not good. The defense is terrible. When I say they don't have playmakers on offense, obviously David Johnson's a premier playmaker. Christian Kirk's up and coming. Larry Fitzgerald's still there, but he's obviously in the twilight of his career. I don't see it, man. I don't see the Cardinals being good at all this year. So I got the Lions winning this one for sure. I think the Cardinals are going to win 4 games this year. I think that they're the most overhyped team. People are just enamored by Kyler Murray being a number 1 guy, dual threat. Cliff Kingsbury, former coach of Patrick Mahomes. He's getting the Mahomes rub. Can you believe it? It's like Sean McVay. And now everybody wants a young head coach. He's getting the Mahomes rub plus the McVay rub. And that's why Cliff Kingsbury is there, I think. I think he'll be out of the NFL in a couple years. I could obviously be wrong about all of this, but that's my take on the situation right now. I got the Lions winning that all day. I think Matt Patricia and the Lions are going to get better this year. The unfortunate thing is that, the Packers, the Vikings, and the Bears are... the Vikings and the Bears are 2 of the best teams in the NFC, and then the Packers are always just a threat like the Patriots. It doesn't matter what their roster looks like, as long as they got number 12 back there. If Aaron Rodgers can stay healthy for 16 games, they could win the damn Super Bowl. Steelers and Patriots. Man, this is a game I do not care about. I hate the Steelers and I hate the Patriots with a passion. I think the Steelers are going to take a step back this year. Roethlisberger's just getting older. He seems to get hurt every single year. He misses time every year. Losing AB is going to be tough. Is James Conner going to be as good as he was last year? I can't see him being as good as he was last year. Juju, can he really thrive in a number 1 role? We'll see. I think he'll be productive. I think Juju is a good fantasy option, but that's because I think the Pittsburgh's going to throw it a ton because they're not a good team. And then the Patriots, Patriots at home in a primetime game. You're probably going to favor the Patriots 9 times out of 10 in this situation, in any home game, let alone a primetime home game. But it is worth noting the Patriots are not very good in September. And I think it's by design, personally. I think in September, Bill Belichick is just so damn confident that he can win games down the line that he uses the first 4 weeks of the season to just, almost like a fighter throwing feints and seeing what reactions he can get out of an opponent. That's kind of what the Patriots do. They like to run fake punts or fake field goals or something. So that way, teams that have to prepare for them for the whole rest of the year have to at least spend some time during their practice week thinking about what if they do a fake. They have to waste some of their precious practice week time anticipating a fake. The Patriots love to do stuff like that. It's really actually very smart. I'll tip my hat to them. It's very smart, and then they also... they use players in such diverse and unique ways. I think that they like to just kind of plug, like, oh, let's see how this guy does in the slot. Let's see how Rex Burkhead, blah blah blah. Like they like to just, just like I said, like it's a fight, like a fighter throwing feints to see how their opponent reacts. The Patriots like to spend basically September doing that, and if they can get out of September 1-3 or 2-2. In the next 12 games in the season, they're pretty confident that they're going to win 9 or 10 of them, and they basically always do, and that's going to get them a good playoff spot. It's for sure going to win you the AFC East, probably the worst division in football, although the Jets and the Bills, as I said, one of them might be good this year. Patriots, I got winning this one, even though they're not usually that great in September. You gotta favor the Patriots home field in a primetime game. Now, on to the first of 2 Monday Night Football games, Texans and Saints, man. Now, this is my second game of the week after the Vikings and the Falcons. Like, God, this is a great game. The Saints are so good, and they're good on offense. They're good on defense. Drew Brees' passing attempts are starting to dwindle, and I don't know if he has the arm strength to really stretch the field like he used to. But, man, with Alvin Kamara there, Michael Thomas, these guys are just great underneath receivers and so reliable, so elusive. Drew Brees is so smart. He knows how to get these guys, just like Tom Brady. He knows how to get these guys into winnable situations, and he's just on the same page as them. So they're just reacting to the way defenses are together, and he can just find these guys all day. And like I said, their defense is stacked. Now the Texans, I think the Texans might be my AFC favorite this year. They've been quietly really, really good in the AFC for the last couple of years. And with Andrew Luck leaving the Colts, that puts the Colts down a couple spots and it raises the Texans up. I really, really believe the Texans, Deshaun Watts, one of the best young quarterbacks in the league. He's like a Russell Wilson out there, but even faster, and more risky. DeAndre Hopkins, debatably the best wide receiver in the NFL, probably the best hands in the NFL, I would say. I remember, everybody remembers the catch they had on the Dolphins last year where he caught it behind his leg and he got a BS offensive pass interference penalty. And I was so glad because I was so embarrassed as a Dolphins fan that he went up and caught it freaking behind his thigh. Like that was pinned the ball to the back of his thigh. Unbelievable catch. And he does that shit routinely. Now, Duke Johnson there, that's going to be huge, I think, for Deshaun, being able to scramble and then dump it off short. It'll be interesting to see how Carlos Hyde fits in there. Carlos Hyde hasn't been as good over the last couple of years as people have wanted him to be. And I think Duke Johnson could really take over the starting running back role. He hasn't had a chance to be a 3-down back in the NFL. But that doesn't mean he can't be. He was a workhorse in college, and obviously he can do the 3rd down work. It'll be interesting to see if he gets a chance at the 1st and 2nd down work. And I think that with DeAndre Hopkins there, Will Fuller there stretching the field, Kiki QT, my boy Kenny Stills now in the building, he can stretch the field too. And with Deshaun Watson being as mobile as he is, I think that whoever's running back there is going to be able to see a lot of favorable defensive fronts. And I'm really interested to see how Duke Johnson does this year. Now, the Saints, you got to take the Saints. They're home in the Dome in primetime. I'll take the Saints against anybody at home in primetime. So I got to take the Saints here, even though I love the Texans. This could be a Super Bowl preview. And I'm not kidding. That's not hyperbole. This could be a Super Bowl preview in week 1. And, man, I'd be excited if that was the Super Bowl. Now, Broncos-Raiders, another game that people don't really care about. I don't really care about Lions and Cardinals, Broncos and Raiders. It's a late game. I'll definitely tune in and watch it because if there's NFL going on, I'm watching, man. Like, that's one of the things that I kind of don't mind about the end of the NFL season until the draft is that I get my Sundays back, my Monday nights, my Thursday nights. I kind of enjoy that time. But once the NFL draft comes, I'm just frothing at the mouth for football action. So I am so excited that it's coming up this weekend. Broncos at Raiders. The Broncos and the Raiders, they're just, the Broncos obviously still got a pretty decent defense. The Raiders, are on a rebuilding arc, trying to. It seems like they're trying to pop that first year that they're in Vegas. And I actually applaud the Raiders for their efforts in rebuilding and actually doing it properly. And I like that we're taking a page out of their book. Like, let's trade away Laramie Tunsil like they traded away Khalil Mack. Like, let's get good value for our top players and try to build for the future. And, the Raiders, they might actually have a team that could start winning this year. Josh Jacobs, it'll be interesting to see how he does. It'll be interesting to see if Derek Carr can return to his old form from a couple of years ago. Like, everybody is writing Carr off, but just a couple of years ago, he was extremely efficient. He supported two legitimate fantasy football options in Amari Cooper and Michael Crabtree. Michael Crabtree has kind of been an underrated receiver throughout his career, but I would argue that the combination of Antonio Brown and Tyrell Williams is probably a better combination. Like, AB is the best wide receiver in the game, I think, talent-wise. Like, that's almost inarguable. I don't think he'll be the best wide receiver this year, per se, but best wide receiver in the game. He's gonna draw so much attention, and Tyrell Williams is a really good threat as an athlete. I got the Raiders winning this one. I'm really just favoring them because it's home field. The Broncos, it'll be interesting to see how they do with Flacco. I don't suspect they'll be able to throw the ball all that well. But, Philip Lindsay and Royce Freeman, new coaching staff, they could probably pound the rock pretty good this year. And pounding the rock and playing good defense, that is a winning formula. That is a key way to win football games. That's how the Seahawks won their Super Bowl a few years back. That's how they're trying to win more Super Bowls. And I really believe in that type of play. I think that a key way to win a Super Bowl is to have a rookie quarterback or a quarterback on a rookie contract, have a good offensive line, a good running game, and a good defense. Spend the money on all that stuff while your quarterback is on his rookie contract. Like Carson Wentz or Russell Wilson. There's a lot of examples in recent history of that being an effective way to win a Super Bowl. And I think that's a much more effective way than having an established, legendary quarterback, game manage for you like the Patriots do with Tom Brady. I think that winning with a rookie, a guy on a rookie contract, developing your offensive line, having a strong running game, have that defense in place, spend your money on those positions and have a guy at quarterback, it's easier said than done to draft Carson Wentz or Russell Wilson, but you need to draft a top quality young quarterback that can not lose you games, can make a couple of plays here and there, and you can rely on that defense and running game. That's how Tom Brady won his early Super Bowls as well. People forget. Everybody wants to give Tom Brady all this credit for his 6 Super Bowl rings. The first 3 Super Bowls, and I mean, I'm giving Tom Brady credit, but that was largely based off of their defense, their running game, and quality special teams. Adam Vinatieri's leg, Vinatieri won them all those games. All right, now my top. So my sort of sure things of the week are, I'm going to call my top suicide picks of the week. And if you don't know what a suicide pool is, well, I don't know what you're doing here, but suicide pool is, it's a pool where every week you have to pick a winner, just a winner of a game. And once you've picked a team, you can never pick them again. So if, let's say, I pick the Seahawks to beat the Bengals this week, which is my number 1 lock of the week, then I can never pick the Seahawks again for the rest of the season. And basically, it's whoever is standing at the end of the season or whoever is like the last team alive wins the pot for these suicide pools. So my top suicide picks for this week are as follows. I like Seattle to beat the Bengals. That's my number 1 pick of the week. Number 2 pick of the week is the Ravens to beat my Dolphins. I just don't see any way that Miami's going to win this game. Although Fitzpatrick, you know what? Fitzpatrick might be able to pull it off. He's a crafty bastard, that guy. He'll win a couple games here and then throw 7 interceptions and get benched for Rosen, But realistically, I got the Ravens winning that one. That's my second suicide pick of the week. Third is going to be the Cowboys versus the Giants. The only reason why that's not second and it's third instead is because it's a divisional game. I don't really care that Zeke's gone. I mean, if Zeke was there, I would maybe bump this up to my second lock of the week. But it's a divisional game. Divisional games are always weird. They're oddly competitive. like I said, the Dolphins beat the Patriots once a year. It seems like every year. It doesn't matter how good the Patriots are or how bad the Dolphins are. So division games are harder to predict, but I like the Cowboys to win that one for sure. And then I like the Browns to beat the Titans pretty much for sure, and the Chargers to beat the Colts. So those are my 5 top suicide picks of the week. If you're in a suicide pool, I would go with one of those guys. Now, you might want to look ahead and see if some of those teams you might want to use in future weeks, and you might not choose the number 1 team, the Seahawks, for this week. You might choose the number 5 team, the Chargers, because you like who the Seahawks play in week 6. But I digress. Those are my top 5 suicide picks of the week. And now I want to talk about a little playoff predictions. So I'll throw these predictions out there, and it'll be interesting to see at the end of the season how right or how wrong I was about these predictions. I feel pretty confident about my AFC predictions. I feel like at least 5 of the 6 teams will probably prove me right. But the NFC, man, that is just... It is so competitive over there. It is insane. There's literally 10 teams in the NFC that I could see not just making the playoffs, but literally going to the Super Bowl and maybe like winning the Super Bowl. I could see 10 teams out of the 16 in the NFC. The parity in the NFC is ridiculous. So my AFC teams, I got the Browns winning their division, the Texans winning their division, the Patriots winning their division, and the Chiefs winning their division. And then I got my wild card teams as the Chargers and the Ravens. Like I said, I think the Steelers are going to fall off. I mean, the Steelers could do something this year. And like I said, I think the Jets or the Bills, one of those 2 teams might be sneaky good this year. Well, like, that's something to watch. I'm gonna pay attention to that. But I feel pretty confident that 5 of those 6 teams are going to do it. Maybe one of those wildcard teams could move out, or one of those wildcard teams might win the division and the other team could move out. Injuries can happen. Obviously, all kinds of stuff can happen. But those are my 6 teams for the AFC. I'm predicting going to the playoffs. NFC predictions, I got the Bears winning their division, the Cowboys winning their division, the Seahawks winning their division, and I got the Falcons winning their division. And then I got the Saints and the Vikings as the 2 wild card teams. But like I said, there's 10 teams in the NFC that I feel like could legitimately have a Super Bowl run. I don't feel super confident about those 6 teams. Per se, I really like the Cowboys and the Seahawks for sure, and the Falcons too. I think the Falcons will squeak in as a wild card at worst. I could see the Saints declining a little bit this year, and I think the Falcons are going to have a hell of a year. So that's why I got the Falcons winning the division and the Saints in at the wild card, and the Vikings in at the wild card too. Like the Packers. Like the Packers are always a Super Bowl threat, so that's one of those 4 teams. The 4 teams that I don't have going to the playoffs that I think could be Super Bowl contenders are the Packers, the Panthers, the Eagles, and the Rams. Like I said, I think the Rams are going to have a Super Bowl hangover this year. I think that's probably a pretty controversial opinion. I bet you everybody's got the Rams going to the playoffs. I don't even have them going to the playoffs, and I feel decently confident about that. But I mean, they obviously have the talent to prove me wrong, so I wouldn't bet on that or anything. The Eagles, they just won the Super Bowl a couple years ago. Their team isn't really any less talented, so I like them potentially, but I think the Cowboys are just a better all-around team. And the NFC is just so competitive that I can't shoehorn the Eagles into a wild card spot. It's hard. I'm putting the Saints and the Vikings in at the wild card, and yeah, man, it's just so competitive over there in the NFC. And then the Packers, like I said, as long as Aaron Rodgers, if he can play 16 games, they could win the damn Super Bowl. It doesn't matter who they have there. They could have literally an all CFL wide receiver crew. It doesn't matter. Aaron Rodgers can win football games. So, and then the Panthers. The Panthers are another dark horse team that I really feel like nobody is expecting a lot out of them. Mostly because of how competitive the NFC is. When you look at it on paper, it's hard to imagine the Panthers getting ahead of, the Falcons or the Saints. And, are the Falcons, the Saints, and the Panthers all going to go to the playoffs? So 3 teams from that division? That means that, the NFC North could have 3 teams go with the Packers, the Bears, and the Vikings. There's just so much parity that I feel like the Panthers are being forgotten about a little bit. But man, if Cam Newton can play 16 games, he's so dynamic back there and hard to defend against. And that defense in Carolina is still pretty elite. So I think Carolina could be a dark horse team this year. I don't have them in the playoffs right now before week 1, but I would not be surprised at all. So that does it for week 1 NFL predictions talk, week 1 NFL talk. Let's talk a little bit of fantasy football now. I want to talk about some sleepers that you could potentially pick up here before week 1. If you're looking at your, picking up sleepers in week 1 is kind of a weird thing, right? Because you just drafted your team. You probably should have drafted a team of guys that you feel confident going with here in week 1. But if you're looking at your roster right now and you're nervous about a particular position or something, I'm going to just throw some names out there of guys that, might have some high ceilings or high floors that you could plug in this week. And, it could help you get a dub in that week 1 that everybody wants a dub, Now, the first guy I'm going to talk about, this is going to sound like a homer opinion by me, but hear me out here. I like Devontae Parker. Devontae Parker, freak athlete, 6'3", 220. He's the prototypical guy that you want to draft as wide receiver. If you just looked at his silhouette, you're like, yeah, and you looked at his athletics and stuff, his 40-time vert, all that stuff, you'd be like, yeah, that's a guy that you want. But he hasn't been able to really make it work in the NFL to this point. But, he hasn't had a quarterback who's like a real gunslinger who really is, has shown that they're adept at using these outside targets, highly athletic outside targets. Tannehill wasn't that guy. Cutler was way over the hill. Matt Moore, these guys weren't the guys. And Fitzpatrick, it's not like Fitzpatrick is this legendary quarterback, but Fitzpatrick has shown that he's capable of utilizing these outside wide receivers and getting them the ball and giving them chances to contribute, particularly in a fantasy football type of forum. In real football, if you look at it, Fitzpatrick's not the best player, but from a fantasy perspective, unless he's throwing 5 picks, which is about half the time, he's throwing 5 touchdowns. The guy, he slings it. And I think he's going to be able to make better use of Devontae Parker than anybody has been able to so far in Parker's career. And Devontae Parker, on all these percentages are going to be NFL.com. I'll state that now. Devontae Parker's only owned in 1.6% of fantasy football leagues. So I think in a standard format, if you're looking for a boom player to put in your flex, if you're in a 12 or 14 team league and you just don't feel good about who you got in your flex or at your wide receiver 2, and you're looking at your opponent and they just got a stacked team and you feel like you need some upside to try to keep up with your opponent, I think Devontae Parker's a guy who could have a huge boom here in the first couple of weeks. As long as Fitzpatrick is playing, I think Devontae Parker has a chance at booming every week. Now we're playing the Ravens in week 1. That's a really tough matchup. So, that might be something worth also considering, that, maybe the matchup is just not favorable and you might want to hold it for a couple weeks and wait till, Fitzpatrick has a little bit more of a favorable matchup. Because like I said, I think as long as Fitzpatrick's in the lineup, Devontae Parker has a pretty high ceiling. Low floor, high ceiling. Now, another guy that is owned in just 12.2% of fantasy football leagues that I think is going to be good, really good this year, is Anthony Miller. Anthony Miller of the Chicago Bears. I think he could finish the season as the Bears' number 1 wide receiver. I think he's probably more athletically talented than Allen Robinson. And Allen Robinson's owned in 99% of fantasy football leagues compared to just 12% for Anthony Miller. The upside of Miller, I think, is probably higher. His floor is lower. And I don't know if I trust Trubisky all the way. I like Trubisky's upside, and I think that he might be able to take a step forward. I think there's a decent chance he can take a step forward and be dynamic this year. And if he does, I think Anthony Miller is going to be a key weapon for him. So Anthony Miller is a guy that I would, if he's only owned in 12% of the leagues, he's worth picking up and stashing. He is he's one of those guys that, you can stash for the future. And it's not like stashing like a Malcolm Brown, like that type of Malcolm Brown or Chase Edmonds, that handcuff type of stash, where you're depending on somebody getting injured in order for them, for the handcuff to be useful. Anthony Miller is just, if Trubisky can get his game going, boom, Anthony Miller's good. So that's what it's contingent upon. It's not contingent upon an injury. It's contingent upon a player who is healthy being able to perform. And I like Trubisky's chances of being able to take a step forward this year. That's why I like the Bears so much. So in PPR format, a wide receiver that I would really like to look at is Adam Humphries. Humphries was pretty dynamic towards the end of last year with Tampa as a PPR guy. He's going to be playing that slot in Tennessee. And Tennessee, Marcus Mariota, even if Ryan Tannehill's playing at quarterback, these guys aren't really great at throwing to the outside. Like they haven't shown an ability at, a really high NFL ability to be able to utilize outside weapons. Delaney Walker's coming back. Delaney Walker might be, a good safety blanket for Marcus Mariota. But Delaney Walker's getting a little bit older. So I think Adam Humphries might be the new safety blanket for Marcus Mariota or Ryan Tannehill. Tannehill loves to throw underneath too. Think about how successful Jarvis Landry was when he was in Miami, getting over 100 receptions every year. These guys, Tannehill and Mariota are both great at dumping it down. And I think Humphries could be a PPR, just a really, really good high floor PPR play week in and week out. He's owned in only 11% of leagues. So, I mean, if you're in a PPR league, go out and get him. If you're not in a PPR league, I don't like him, because I think he's dependent on the catching volume. He's going to be a 5, 6, 7 reception a game kind of guy. That's how he's going to be successful in fantasy football. So in regular formats, I would stay away. But if you're in a PPR and you're looking for a high floor type of guy, I think Adam Humphries is a guy to go out. He's available in 88% of the leagues on NFL.com. So go out and get him. And I think at tight end, if you didn't get one of the top 5 guys, I really think that you need to get a guy with high upside. And I think Eifert has way more upside than Eric Ebron, Jack Doyle, Greg Olsen, Jason Witten, even a more upside than Austin Hooper, Trey Burton. There's all those guys, might have a little bit better of floors, but the upside with Eifert is a top 5, top 6, top 7 tight end at worst. He's a really dynamic player out there on the field. Andy Dalton likes to use him. If he can stay healthy, Tyler Eifert's a good play. And guess what? Tyler Eifert's healthy week 1. So if you're not confident at your tight end, if you have somebody like Witten or Olsen or somebody like that, I would go out and get Eifert. I think he's got the higher ceiling. And until he gets injured, I think he's going to be a weekly good play at the tight end position. Now, if you have one of the top guys, like Hunter Henry, O.J. Howard, Ertz, Kittle, Kelsey, Evan Ingram, those top 6 guys rather, then don't worry about it. But if you have anybody else, I think Eifert is worth a start, potentially. Now, Justin Jackson, for some reason, he's only owned in 15% of leagues on NFL.com. If you remember towards the end of last year, when Melvin Gordon was gone, Justin Jackson was getting the majority of the early down work, and he was very consistent and successful there. I think Austin Eckler is going to be locked into the third down role if it's Melvin Gordon or if it's Justin Jackson, but he'll get a little bit of that first and second down work, a little bit extra of that first and second down work if it is Justin Jackson instead of Melvin Gordon. If it's Melvin Gordon, he's basically just getting the third down work with maybe a change of pace once in a while. With Justin Jackson, he's going to get all the third down work and probably a little bit extra reps in the change of pace role on first and second down, but Justin Jackson is still probably going to get the majority of the reps there. That's a high octane offense with an elite quarterback, elite wide receivers. Mike Williams is a guy who could catch 12 touchdowns. Keenan Allen, one of the highest reception rates of any receiver in the NFL. Hunter Henry, he's going to be a beast at tight end this year. I think he's going to be a breakout tight end of the year, the breakout tight end of the year. So, Justin Jackson is potentially like an RB2 here. Like, he's going to finish in the top 24 running backs, I feel like, pretty consistently until Melvin Gordon comes back. If Melvin Gordon ever comes back, he might not ever come back. Apparently, the Chargers have suspended contract negotiations with him, and they're letting him seek a trade. So, at this point, I don't think Gordon is coming back. So Justin Jackson is literally an RB2 sitting out there. He's only owned in 15% of leagues. So in 85% of leagues on NFL.com, you could just go out and pick up an RB2. If you have Darwin Thompson, drop Darwin Thompson. He's with LaShawn McCoy going into Kansas City. He's now the third fiddle. There's a lot of guys that you should be dropping to pick up Justin Jackson. And that's like not just a week one sleeper. That's a season-long sleeper. That's a guy that could win you a championship. Now, I'm not overstating that. That's for real. Now, looking at quarterbacks, it gets a little bit ridiculous with how much these quarterbacks are owned. So many people draft 2 quarterbacks, and it doesn't make any sense. The quarterbacks are owned in so many more, such a higher percentage of leagues than these other players that I'm going to talk about. But let's start with Mitch Trubisky. He's owned in 39% of leagues, high percentage. I wanted to pick quarterbacks that were owned in lesser percentages, but people just have 2 quarterbacks apparently in majority of leagues. I'm not sure why, but a lot of people must have 2 quarterbacks based on how much some of these quarterbacks are owned around NFL.com. So Trubisky is owned in 39%. Like I said, he's got serious rushing upside, and he's got just an insane plethora of playmakers around him. He's a guy that he could win you a championship for sure. And he was a dude that you could have drafted so late in the draft, and you could have stocked up on so many other positions. I just can't believe that so many quarterbacks are owned because they're such a dime a dozen. But Trubisky, I love this week 1. Packers D improved, but not great. Trubisky's got serious rushing upside. He could be easily good for 4 points a game just in rushing. And then he's got all those talented receivers. Robinson, last year he was coming off the ACL, so I'm expecting him to take a step forward this year. And then, like I said, I think Anthony Miller is going to finish as the wide receiver 1 on the team at the end of the year. Tariq Cohen, just an absolute gadget beast of a player that you can dump down to. He's going to, you throw a 5-yard pass and he runs 80 yards for a touchdown, and it's like, oh, there's a 7-point play for my quarterback on a 5-yard dump off. So Trubisky, and then David Montgomery is going to be interesting. I like Trubisky a lot this year. He's a guy, if you see him on the waiver wire, he could be worth picking up. I think he's going to probably finish in the top 12 quarterbacks this week. So, if you've got a more middling quarterback, Trubisky could be a guy worth going after. And then here's the next quarterback I'm going to talk about, Jimmy Garoppolo, who is somehow he is owned in 45% of leagues. Like, Jimmy Garoppolo is owned in 45% of leagues, and Justin Jackson's only owned in 15% of leagues. People don't understand how to play fantasy football. If Jimmy Garoppolo is available and you need a quarterback this week, Jimmy G could do it for you. A bit of a very, very favorable matchup against just a disastrous Tampa Bay defense. And Tampa's going to have a dynamic offense, and San Fran's got a bad defense. So this is going to be a shootout of a game. I love Winston, like I said, all year. Jimmy G, if he's available, this is going to be a shootout, and I like him as a high upside play this week. If you feel like you need an upside play, I like Jimmy Garoppolo. I think he's going to finish, I bet a lot of people are probably starting Russell Wilson over Jimmy Garoppolo. Jimmy Garoppolo is, I would almost guarantee, going to outscore Russell Wilson here in week 1. The only apprehension I have from basically guaranteeing that is the fact that Jimmy's coming off of the ACL. Who knows how he's going to look in week 1, So I'm a little bit apprehensive to say that he will for sure be better than like a Russell Wilson, but I think he'll probably be better than Russell Wilson. He'll probably be better than Carson Wentz. He's going to probably be a top 8, 9 quarterback this week. A top 10 quarterback this week. I haven't looked exactly at all the rankings, but I like his upside this week. I think against a terrible defense in what's going to be a shootout of a game, and he's got playmakers around him. I love Jimmy G this week. Somehow he's owned in 45% of the leagues, but like I said, if you got a Russell Wilson or somebody like that playing instead, Russell Wilson, Carson Wentz, if you got one of those guys playing instead, I would prefer to go with Jimmy Garoppolo. I might be in the minority here, but I think that next week I'm going to be able to boast that I was right about that. And honorable mention, I'm going to say Dak Prescott. Now, he's owned in just another absurd amount of fantasy leagues. I think he's owned in like over 80% of fantasy leagues, which I can't believe that. I thought he was a sleeper that you'd probably be able to grab off the waiver wire for week 1 to 3, where he's got just cakewalk matchups for the first 3 weeks of the season. So if you're a person who is okay with streaming quarterbacks, or you're not sure, you don't like maybe your matchups early on in the season or something, Dak Prescott is a phenomenal play for the first 3 weeks of the season. Zeke or no Zeke, I really think he's going to finish as a QB1 every week for the first 3 weeks of the season. So just check your waiver wire. If Dak Prescott's out there, maybe go ahead and pick him up. Flip him after week 3, when his value is at its highest. Try to trade him off, or just freaking drop him for somebody else. And so that's it for my fantasy football week 1 sleepers. So that does it for the inaugural episode of Joel Empey Talks Football. And you can expect this show coming out weekly all season long. I'm going to be dropping episodes hopefully on Tuesday. My internet's kind of garbage, so the uploads might not be available till Wednesday. But all season long, Tuesday or Wednesday, I'm going to be dropping new episodes. We're going to be going through similar types of segments as we did in this episode. I might add or remove or adjust segments as I go on. I'm going to try to make this thing as entertaining and informative as possible. So once again, thank you very much for tuning in. I really appreciate it. Like I said, please comment below anything. I'll respond to all comments. Like the video, subscribe to the channel, hit the bell beside the subscribe button. Follow me on Twitter at Empey Talks. And until next time, cheers, friends.